Okay, this will be our introduction to Onshape, and what we're going to model is a luggage tag for your book bag and then a smaller size for your keyring. So there are step-by-step directions with dimensions in this Google Doc, along with a video, and we'll probably model this as well in class. But if you happen to miss or need to come back to this document, all the dimensions are here. We're going to model the luggage tag or book bag tag size first, and then I'll have you repeat the process to make a size for your keyring. Okay, so when we model this, it's going to look like this, and then we'll also learn how to export that and 3D print. Okay, the first thing that's going to happen when you first open your Onshape for the very first time, it's going to start you in a part environment file, which is what we are actually in right now. And what we're going to want to do is create file folders for things anyways. So let's click up here and go to Documents. You click on Onshape up on the document panel. And then once you're up there, you will want to be able to create project folders for your different projects. So I recommend a project folder for 3D print. All our big projects like the train or reverse engineering, we might, you're going to want a project folder just for that. And if you're just doodling or doing a practice project, create a folder called practice. So I'm going to show you. I'll just click on that, create a folder, name it practice, and that's all I need to do. So that way you're going to want to put files that you want into those folders so that they're organized. And that's very important for CAD modeling programs because the files need to talk to each other and need to know where each other are. Onshape is a little bit easier to work with in some respects because, like Google Documents, it's designed to be used on a browser, and therefore everything automatically saves. There are better options working with Fusion or Inventor, and if we're in school long enough, we are going to do that. And then you're going to have to remember to save on a more regular basis. But in case we end up at home due to the pandemic, we're going to start off by learning how to use the browser version of Onshape. Okay, so after you've created a file called 3D print, if you had any files in there, they would show up. And I want you to instead, let's create a new document. And I want you to call yours name tag with your initials. And I'm going to call mine demo name tag. I want you to have your initials attached to the end of your documents. That way, when they get shared or uploaded, they don't all have the same name. And that file name is also a part name, so that is also important. So we'll create create your new document, say OK, and that's going to open up a document workspace. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the interface for Onshape. First of all, up at the top, we have the document menu, document options, and so on will be in there. And then we have this whole browser or this whole toolbar. And like any Windows program, if you pause, it first of all tells you what the tool is, and secondly, you pause a little bit longer, it gives you a little bit of directions on how to perhaps use that tool. Over here is the view cube, and that allows you to rotate around and look at different planes. Okay, and that's pretty typical amongst CAD programs. On the left side of the screen, we also have the browser or model tree history, as it's sometimes called. And at the very bottom, we have the tabs. So by default, when you start a new document file, it starts a part studio, which is where you model parts or components, and it has an assembly tab. Now you notice when you go to the assembly environment, all the tools changed. Well, we don't really need that tab at this time. We want to work in a part studio. And when we create a part, we can also rename that. So we're going to call this demo name tag, and then my initials. And then you're also going to need to rename the parts in the parts menu on the browser as well. So first things first, we are in this parts tab, and this part is being built in millimeters. So I'm going to go up and I need to change my workspace units. The default is inches, and I want to make it in millimeters. You don't have to change the mass, but you could change the mass if you want to. You could change different angles or whatever. Typically, we're going to model parts in millimeters or in inches. So it just depends what the part file is that we're working on. Okay, so in order for that to save, you have to hit the green check mark. If you hit the X, it won't save your change. So that's one of my frustrations. I sometimes hit the X, and then if I do that, oh, I hit the wrong thing there. If I hit the X and I go to workspace units, it still says inches. So if you want a change that you made to stick, don't hit the X to close the dialog box. You got to hit the green check mark with a left click of your mouse. Okay, so now my part will be in millimeters. Okay. First thing we're going to do, we've changed that to millimeters. We're going to select a sketch, and then you have to pick which sketch plane that you want to draw on. We're going to draw on the front plane for this part, which will be a sketch on the XY plane. Okay, in order to start modeling the part, we first need a sketch. So we'll create a new sketch, and then we have to pick the plane we want to draw on. So you usually want to think about the orientation for when you're selecting a plane of how that part is going to be used in an assembly. Since this is a single part, it wouldn't really matter that much, but I'm just going to select the front plane. Okay, and as soon as I do that, now I'm in a sketch environment and my tools have changed at the top. So now I have sketching tools. So let's select the corner rectangle tool, and this point here in the very middle of the screen should be the origin. And we want to click twice to draw a rectangle. Now we want that rectangle to be 100 millimeters by 50 millimeters. And you'll notice after 2 clicks, it opens up a dialog box to edit those values. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 100 millimeters for one and 50 millimeters for the other. Okay. If you forgot to and clicked out of those and put in values, you can just double click to change them. Or up here, there is a dimension tool, and then you can add the dimensions very easily. It is faster if you do it on the fly. Okay, escape gets you out of a tool, so that's another really key button to know. And then when we're done, we want to finish the sketch. And again, to save what we've drawn, you have to click the check mark and not the X. If you click the X, you'll just delete everything you just drew. So we have to left click on the check mark. So that will finish the sketch. And then this is a intuitive program. It kind of works from the top left to right in order of importance for all these tools. So the most common thing that we do is what's called an extrusion. So I'm going to hit the extrusion button. I'm going to click my sketch, and we're going to extrude that a depth of 3 millimeters and hit enter. And then hit the check mark. Okay, so now we have a part started. Okay, now that we've created that part, we see down here in the parts menu of the browser, there's the part name and it's listed as part 1. We never want to keep that as a generic name. So best practice, go ahead and rename that right away. And we'll name that as name tag, your initials. And for mine, I'm going to call it demo name tag with my initials. Okay, after that, we're going to come up here and find the chamfer tool. And again, if you pause for a moment, it'll tell you what it is. And it gives you a little bit of an intro or directions to show how to use that tool. So I'm going to select the chamfer tool, and I want to put 15 millimeter chamfers on 4 of the edges. No, I'm sorry, just 2 of the edges. So I'm going to do that edge there, and then I'm going to click the bottom corner of the cube and zoom in and get good eyes. Now to zoom in and out, I'm using my mouse wheel to roll in so I can get good eyes and zoom in and pick the edge that I want to chamfer. So what that does is cut that off at a 45-degree angle. Again, you got to click the check mark or the changes you made disappear. Right next to the chamfer tool is the fillet tool. So let's select the fillet tool, and instead of cutting those off at a 45, it's going to round them off. So let's make this a 6 millimeter, and all of those edges that we just created with the chamfer, there'll be 4 edges. We're going to add 4 fillets that are 6 millimeters. We'll hit the check box. Okay, and again, I can click on the corners of the cube. That keeps me a little bit tilted. Let's grab that fillet tool again. And then this time, we're going to fillet the other 2 ends 10 millimeters. So that'll round that off and gives that kind of a cool looking appearance. Okay, go ahead and click the check mark. So our name tag is starting to take shape. I want to start a new sketch, and this time I want to hover and left click over top of the top face there that we're looking at, or actually the front face. Okay, and once I do that, then I'm going to click offset, and the offset moved to the outside, so it took that border, that profile that we already had, and it moved that to the outside. So I want to click the arrow that'll make it go inside, and I want the offset to be a distance of, let's see, what, 3 millimeters. So I just hit enter and hit 3, and that makes the offset 3 millimeters. So that allows me to put a border around this, hit the green check mark, and I'm going to extrude, and let's just select the border and come up a distance of 1.2 millimeters. Hit the check mark. So now we have a little bit of a border around the outside. Let's then select the chamfer tool again. And we want a chamfer of 0.8 millimeters. And what I want you to do is just select that border ring on that top face, and it automatically grabs all those edges. So that way we don't have, this time, we don't have to select the individual feature lines that we want to chamfer. We select that donut ring, and it did it all at once. Hit the check mark, and there we go. We're making a lot of progress here. Next, we're going to drill a hole so that we can put this on a carabiner and clip it on our backpack. So we're going to select the front face there, not the front plane, but the face of the luggage tag. And then once we have a sketch there, we just need to put a point in there. So I'm going to select a point, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Okay, so I drew one point, and then I might want to look head on at this here, because now I need to dimension that. So I'm going to select the dimension tool, and I'm going to dimension to the origin. A vertical distance to the origin needs to be in the middle of the 50 millimeters, which would be at 25. And then a horizontal distance to the origin, we want, and notice it can, depending upon how you move your mouse, you can get horizontal, aligned, or vertical. So our horizontal distance, we want to be 7 millimeters. Okay, so that gives us a location to drill a hole. We'll finish the sketch, and up here you want to find the hole tool, and there are lots of different hole types and different options. We want to select a simple hole, and we want to drill it through. Instead of drilling it blind where it wouldn't go all the way through, we want to drill a through hole. So we're going to select through, select that face, and yes, we are drilling a 7 millimeter hole. All right, next we're going to add some text to our name tag. So in order to do that, we're going to create a sketch, pick the front face of the name tag there, and then there's a text box. So we can just eyeball a text box and type whatever you want for your name. You can highlight it, make it bold, whatever, italics. I hit check on that text box, and you'll notice it seems to make it too big. That's okay. The way the text has to be resized is with dimensions. So I'm going to come up here and grab the dimension tool, and let's make this about 80 millimeters in length. And then let's put a few more dimensions in for a height. Let's see, let's try 32. And then a horizontal distance, and I'm just clicking and dimensioning to the origin. Let's see, that looks okay. If I want to do a second text box, which I'm going to, I'm going to, and I exited that sketch, so I'm going to right click and go in and edit that sketch instead of creating a new sketch. Let's create additional text. You could put your graduation year on there, or Dover High School, or your nickname, whatever you want, as long as it is school appropriate. And again, in order to get that positioned, let's go back in and edit that sketch. We need to dimension it. So let's see, let's make that 60 wide. And now, just playing with those numbers, you just need to get it dimensioned to where it looks good to you. So, you know, your name and your text, you're going to have to tweak a little bit based on what the size of your text is. So for my name, that looks pretty good. Maybe as I'm drawing this right now, maybe I want to move this down a little bit so I can just double click. And you can see it's very easy to adjust something. And maybe I'll slide that over. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, just at a glance. Okay, so you're going to have to tweak that for your name and the text that you put on your name tag. And of course, once you're done with that, you can extrude and we want to extrude that text a height of 1.2 millimeters. Okay, so it may take you a little while to get your text to look centered and visually look good, but once you figure out the numbers you need to dimension and get it where you want it, go ahead and extrude that and get it set up. Okay. Okay, next we're going to assign a material to this part that we've created. And then that's going to allow us to estimate the cost that this is going to be to 3D print. So in order to do that, the easiest way, there's more than one way to do this, but I'm gonna right click on the part name in the browser, and I'm gonna select Assign Material. Okay, and that brings up a library. You can search by typing if you want. We actually would need to add a custom material for PLA, polylactic acid, but we'll just select ABS because it's readily available and it will be close enough for what we're doing right now. So I selected ABS, we'll hit the check mark to accept the change, and nothing apparently changed. Okay, but it actually did. We'll get to that in a minute. Next, let's make this look better. We can also edit the appearance. So I'm going to take that whole name tag and I'm going to color it red. Okay, and we can also change some other features. So I'm going to take that extrusion, the chamfer, and the border extrusion, and I'm going to press Control or Shift. Okay, now I want to change the color of some of those features. So I'm going to just right click on the browser, that last extrusion, which would be the text, and select Add Appearance to that feature. And let's just make it the gray color. So now I've got gray text, and let's do a gray extrusion as well. And then perhaps the chamfer. Okay, so that's going to make it look a little bit more like our finished product when we print it out. Okay, next, now that we've changed the material properties, we're going to estimate the cost of 3D printing this part. So that's actually very easy to do. Down in the very bottom right-hand corner, that's a button that says Display Mass Properties. So if I select that and then select the part from the browser, then we see that the mass is 0.036 pounds. Okay, so, and that is dependent upon the fact that we selected an ABS material. If you did not select a material, it's not going to calculate it. All right, so once we have that, then we can go to our engineer's notebook or our scratch paper, and we can pull that information in. It's very easy to set up a proportion to calculate the mass of the part or the cost of the part. So our cost, we don't know, but we know that our part, my part, weighs 0.036. Your part could weigh a little different because you're going to have different text on your part, but it should be close to that number. And then a full spool of filament costs $35, and it weighs 2.205 pounds or 1 kilogram or 1,000 grams. So that's kind of our benchmark of what a spool of filament costs. So then, of course, we can cross multiply and find out what that value is, you know, cross multiplying to solve a proportion like we learned in 6th grade math, and then divide, and that gives us an estimated cost of 57 cents for our part. Finally, we'll export this part to an STL file, which is the file type that our printers need in order to 3D print the part. So you can either click on the part, or you can point and click on the browser and right click and select export, and that's going to bring up this dialog box. And when this dialog box comes up, probably shorten that name a little bit. It seems like it's grabbing both the container name and the tab or part name, which in this case it's repeated. You want to make sure that the units are millimeters and it's fine resolution, and that might not be the standard. Binary is the correct format, so make sure everything looks exactly like this dialog box, and then say OK, and that will generate the STL and download it. Okay. Now, in order for that to get to the 3D printers, we have to manually set them up at the printers in the back of our classroom. So therefore, you're going to want to navigate to your Google Drive. And then I shared a file folder with you. So you're going to look initially under Shared with Me. It's called 3D Print Objects. So if you look under Shared with Me, any file shared with you, you're going to want to find that, right-click on it, and add that file to your shared drive so that you don't have to navigate to the shared drive all the time. But then once you are in that 3D Objects print folder, there should be a folder called Book Bag Name Tag. And then from there, we can click New, do a file upload, and navigate then to your Downloads folder, because that's where that would temporarily put that STL file that we just exported from Onshape. Okay, so now that we have that download file, or that downloaded file uploaded to the right folder, then we can set up the print job on the printers. Okay, we're going to now repeat that process to build a keychain size name tag. So in order to simplify your file structure, we can create that in the same container. So down here on the tabs, it says Insert New Element. So let's create a new Part Studio, and then we can rename this as Keychain, my initials, and then we can model the keychain using the same process that we did to model the book bag tag. So if we look in there at the very end of the document, there are dimensions for overall sizes. And again, getting the overall size is critical. So we want to get, all these should be a total of 3 millimeters in height. It's got to be metric. 2 millimeters for the base, and then extruded another millimeter. In the overall size, 24 by 72. So if we can follow those dimensions, then you can also have a keychain size. You are going to want your text to be very big, and maybe only a first name or last name. If you try to put too much text on there, it's not going to print very well. Okay, so at this point, you're on your own.